Hi, and welcome to Lock Haven's A Senior Moment. I'm Mary Beth Truitt. I'm the marketing director at Lock Haven, and I am so pleased today to be with two friends of mine who have a very, very, very special story that I am so happy to share with you, our viewers. Here in the home, actually, of Roma Abeln. We are in New Cambria, Missouri, and with us, joining us, is Jean Ray to my left. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
These two ladies have got a common thread that brought them together, and they are both from England. And we're going to let them kind of tell you the story of what brought them to the United States to live most of their, or all of their adult life almost, and how they became such wonderful friends through the last many years. I'm going to start over here to the left with Jean. Jean, give us just a little bit of a bio of where you were from in England, just a little bit about yourself when you lived, especially in England. Let's start with that.
Okay, I was born in Birmingham, England, and as my school teacher told us to remember, Birmingham, they make anywhere from a safety pin to electric generators. It was a steel town. Yes, about as large as Chicago. And so I was a city girl, and we walked to school about 5 miles, and I went to the infant school and then the middle school, and then finally the senior school where I graduated. I was one of 6 children. Actually, I was, let's see, the fifth one. And the first 3 were girls, and then they had a boy named George, and they were just thrilled to death with George. Our dad was, anyway. And then here I come, not long after that, and I'm sure they wasn't too happy about that, because there was another mouth to feed. You see, that was during the beginning of the war, and food was short. And it got shorter to where we really didn't have enough to eat. So as we got older and went to school, we took a sandwich of lard and bread. And that was always lovely, because they'd wipe that piece of bread around in the frying pan that everything had been fried in before, you know. They kept everything, didn't they, Roma? And that was my school lunch. And then when we came home from school, my brother and I, Bobby, he was the last one born, we shared an egg. And Bobby always got the yellow, but you know, I loved him so much I didn't care. And I had the white. And we would have a piece of bread and butter apiece, and that was it till the next day.
Yeah.
So we didn't feel like we was mistreated, or we didn't feel like we was any different than the rich kids. You know,
Right.
We just had a wonderful childhood, playing our games in the streets, hopscotch and glarnies. Glarnies are marbles, and we'd roll them and play games, and I used to win all the glarnies off the boys. And I had a big old tin, and it was always full of glarnies. And so I would sell them to the boys, 10 for a penny, and then I would win them all back again. So I remember that very vividly. And,
Great,
yeah.
wonderful. That's a great memory of your childhood. Roma, let's hear a little bit about you and England and where you were born, and a little bit about your childhood.
Okay, well, I was born in Oxford, England, and I was the eldest child of 7. And but I was the only child for 6 years, and my mother and father worked for a minister. My mother was the housekeeper, and my father was the gardener. And this was prior to World War II. And of course, then when I was about 6, I had a baby sister, Anthea, and we moved into our own home, which was very fortunate at that time, and we were luckily able to purchase it simply because my dad and mother had a simple job that they'd saved their money, and they could do it. But anyway, after that, seemed like every 2 years I had either a brother or a sister, so I ended up with 3 of each. However, the youngest one, I didn't meet her until she was 11 years old, because she was born 9 months to the day after I left England to come to America. And I figured my father and mother must have surely had something to do with that after she got home from seeing me off at Southampton.
Replacement.
But anyway, her name is Linda, and she still is the only girl over there because I've got 2 sisters live in this country.
Oh, really?
But then when we were children, our life was just, busy. We had garden, and we always had to do the garden and also take care of the house. And we all had a job in the house to do, and I think that's where I'm a little old-fashioned with things around here, even now. And but anyway, going to school, I went to St. Christopher's School, and that was an infant school, and it was good. We used to get a carton, not a carton, was a little bottle of milk every day. They used to come around with it. The milkman came around to the school, and we all got a free one. And but then at lunchtime, we always had to take a sack lunch. And then in as far as our other years, I used to come home for lunch every day on my bicycle. And sometimes I'd have chips and eggs. Sometimes I'd have beans and chips. And, I mean, it was right before the war, and things was getting scarce. And but overall, my childhood was not too bad. I was the eldest. Always had to do the work. And when I used to...
That's what the oldest always thinks, that they have to do all the work. I've heard that before.
Well, do you know, I had a confession from my mother the last time I saw her alive. She had a lovely window, about like my back window here, and she'd sit there in her armchair, and she'd rock back and forth, and she'd see this. She had a silver birch tree that was in her yard, and she'd say, "Roma, can you see that lovely silver birch?" She said, "It reminds me of you when you used to dance." And of course, when I was young, I went to ballet classes, believe it or not. I went to ballet classes.
Yeah.
And she said, "It reminds me of you when you were young." And she said, "And then the more I think about it, I feel so sorry for you," because she said, "I think I was too hard on you when you were young." And so I said to her, "Mom, don't worry about it, because everyone has to learn off first."
Absolutely.
So that's the way we went through life until I left home.
Can I say something about the house?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
This is something Roma told me, and it sticks with me because I love to hear her stories of England. One day she was scrubbing the kitchen floor, and she was on her hands and knees, and it was tile, and here come a father through the door, and he'd been in the pigsties, with the pigs, and he started through and was leaving mud and stuff on the floor. And she said, "Oh, Dad," she said, "I'm washing these." He said, "Roma, this is my castle." And so she knew from then on. She didn't say another word.
He was never a cruel man, but he could say something to you that would make you shrink down to 1 inch size,
That was it.
Yeah.
When he spoke,
Yes, that was it.
Yes, I think we understand those kind of things too. Your story, whether it's in England or United States, because I do a lot of little interviews like this, it's very similar of that time, though. You know, it was hard times everywhere in the world, and people did have to work hard. So your stories are very similar that way, and it was wartime, as Roma said. You know, and so I want to talk about that a little bit. I'll start with Roma because we're calling this English War Brides, which is only encompassing a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. But Roma really was an English war bride. So let's find out how you met. Morris was your husband, is that correct? So can you tell me how you met Morris Wyatt? I'm sorry, you're Morris Abeln. Your last name was Wyatt, correct? Roma Wyatt.
Yes.
All right. So let's find out how you met Morris.
Okay. I met Morris actually on the street to start with. And I was, in fact, going to shopping. And he walked by and he kind of looked at me. And I thought, well, there's a lot of Americans here. You know, there's loads of them everywhere you look. You didn't have to look twice, but it seemed like everywhere I went, he followed me. So anyway, I went in to get a drink, and he followed me. and he asked me what my name was, and I said to him, well, that's really none of your business. And he said, well, I'd like to know. So I told him my name was Roma. And he said to me, oh, that's a lovely name, Roma. I said, well, and he said to me, why did you get named Roma? And he thought, I think it was to do with the church, but it wasn't at that time. And I told him that the nurse that delivered me, I was her first delivery, and she asked if I would be named after her, and that's why my mother called me Roma.
Did you know that, Jean?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great story.
Anyway, that's how I met him, and then we had dates over a period of months, and some failed, some didn't, and then as we got closer together, we found that we enjoyed each other's company, and he told me that he lives in the country, way out in the country. Whether I should say this or not, but maybe I will, where the hoot owls love the chickens. And then when I got to Wien, I decided that he wasn't telling me a lie.
So he was from Wien, Missouri.
Yes.
Ah.
He was born in Salisbury, Missouri, but he moved to Wien when he was 12 years old, I think, and that they've lived there ever since.
Wow, that is a.
Anyway, with him, then we made a date to get married, and he had come back from the Battle of the Bulge. He'd been in the Battle of the Bulge, and he had been to hospital with frozen feet and wounds from the fighting there. But anyway, he was a good man, and I just felt like I could trust him. And so we had a wedding. We had a wedding in St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Church in England. And I married, I joined the church right before I married him.
How old were you, Roma?
I was 18.
18.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Of course, I left school when I was 14, you know. I graduated from school, and we worked when we were 14, and so by the time I was 18, I'd had 4 years of good hard work and going out to work and earning money.
Right.
So-
You were a woman. You were
Yes.
18 was a lot older than it is
That's
today.
right, yes, most
Yeah.
definitely. I had a lovely white dress, and my two sisters were my bridesmaids. And we had a reception at the home afterwards where all the friends of my husband's came. We all had a big shindig and a big hoedown.
Was his family able to come to the wedding in England?
No.
Okay.
No, these were just all Army friends that he had, and some that survived with him from Europe when they came back to England to the hospital.
And then how long after you got married, did you move to the United States then?
Well, I had to wait for 11 months. Yes.
Okay.
And we were married in 1946, and I got to come in January of 1946. And and I came to this country, in fact, March 13th, 1947. So it will be 67 years come March the 13th
Yes, you're very
since I first came here.
Wonderful. Okay, Jean, I want to hear your story. And
Okay.
we, I know it was not World War II.
No.
It was probably 10 years past
right.
this, I think. So
Yes,
tell me about GC and how you met him.
Okay, let's see. I was 17, and a friend and I were going to Cheltenham for the weekend on a little vacation. English people did this periodically just to get away from the city. And so she met this GI, as we called them, and he was really nice. And I was just like what do you call it,
A third wheel.
Third wheel, right. So later on, June asked me if I would go with his friend. And I said, well, I'll see, Well, here he come, and we were sitting in a little restaurant having coffee, and here he come, and I thought, oh my goodness, he's too old for me. He didn't have much hair. I thought, oh, I can't go with him, I was just a kid. But as we got to talking, he seemed very, very nice. He's very polite, and he was honest. I realized that before too long. So it wasn't too long then that June's boyfriend had to go back to the States. He was from Georgia, and he couldn't afford to take June with him. He was a poor boy, and so when he left, she was just devastated. So I figured that was the end, for both of us, because I really wasn't in love with GC, not then. But after he left and June went on with her life, he showed up at our house one Saturday night. Oh, I said, what's our dad going to think, Because, back then, you didn't have a gentleman stay all night with you.
Right.
Well, I didn't know he was coming. I went downstairs in my dressing gown. We had to cover up everything, because our dad was very Victorian, so was most of the other people, parents. And here he come, knocking on the door, and he'd had some teeth worked on, and he wasn't in a very good shape. So I said, oh, Mom, I said, what's Dad going to say? Well, anyway, Dad said that he could sleep on the sofa. Well, the sofa was about 5 foot long, and that was the last time he stayed all night with us. Poor thing, he had put his head on one end of the sofa and his legs way out, and Dad threw an overcoat on him, I think. And actually, the next morning, I know he was hungry, and so we only had bacon and eggs once in a great while. I think Mum fixed a cup of tea and a piece of toast, and there you got it. So then we went for a long walk in the country, and he said later on when we got back, we probably walked 5 miles that day just to be doing something, and I love the country. He said, you about killed me when I was going on them walks with you in England. He said, I never said a word, but my feet was killing me. So actually he grew on me. I got to think a lot of him, and I was in love with him. Not deeply, but at that time. But so he asked me if I could come to Oxford one weekend, and so didn't have anything going on. So I said yes, I can come. And so we got there, and he met me at the train station. We bought some fish and chips, and wrapped in newspaper like the English do. And we walked to the park and sat down on a bench and had our lunch. The park was beautiful. It was full of flowers, and it was a lovely environment for what was coming. And so he got down on his knee and he said, Jean, I'm as poor as a church mouse. He said, but I'd like to marry you. And
How sweet.
it was really sweet. And then I come find out he had 80 acres of ground, and that to an English person.
You
He's
thought
like-
he was a king.
Why, sure, I did. So, but that didn't influence me then. I just thought about it, that
Right.
how he said he was poor as a church mouse,
Yeah.
and how humble he was.
Right.
So it wasn't long after that we set a date. And then, let's see, we had to set it earlier because then he got his papers to go back to the States. And I didn't have very much time to get ready for a wedding. So
Right.
anyway, Dad bought me a lovely wedding dress. I had bridesmaids. And on the day of my wedding, I done everything. I bought the food, I set the table, I went after the cake, I got the flowers, I fixed my own hair. And this is funny, and I have the picture of it. I bought celery, I stuck it in a jam jar, you know, like just a
Right.
jar.
Right.
And he wasn't very festive, but, you know, it was all right.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And so that was my story.
That
of
was
my,
and then you. How long before you came to the United States? Then, Jean, after you were married.
let's see, we got married in December of '56 and sailed away in 1957 May.
Yeah. So exactly, pretty much 10 years apart on
Yes.
all of that.
We've always figured to each
Yes,
other when we've discussed
yes.
things.
And as I crossed the street that night to go with him to our apartment he had in Oxford, our mum shouted across the street, "Ginny, don't worry, you're going to the land of plenty." And I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I got to the States, people, especially my sister-in-law, she told everybody. She says, you know, that girl eats a pound of butter with every meal. Because, you know, not used to having
Yes. Yeah.
having that much food.
Yes,
All
and
I
I'm
wanted.
sure that you had to even become accustomed to, which we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Yes, and how it just a whole change of the culture, and I really do want to talk about that. First, I want to talk though about how you two met, because it's not that these two women are just guests with me. These two women are very, 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 very close friends
Like
who
sisters.
did not know each other before
No.
and who have become like sisters since. So I'd kind of like Roma, or who would like to tell that story? You could.
I'll tell it.
All right.
I'll tell it. I heard, I used to shop in Macon, but I still do, but then I shopped in Macon, and they had the store there on the corner.
Ian
It was P.N. Hurst, but before that it was the New York store. It was called the New York store. And what it sold upstairs was nothing but material to make clothes. I had 3 daughters at the time that I used to buy enough material to make 3 dresses. So there was a lady that worked up there whose name was Mrs. Iman. Emmett Iman was her husband. And Ida was the lady, and she knew me because I was friends with her daughter, Lavis. And she said to me, Roma, she said, we've got a new girl that's a young lady that's moved to Bavaria, her and her husband, and she's from England. And she said, I'm very good friends with her mother-in-law, and she's been telling me that Jean is just so homesick. She said she just needs somebody, she just won't eat and she's not doing well. So do you think you could come over and see her? So I talked to Morris about it, and all we had for vehicle at that time was the old yellow Jeep, and that's been many, many miles. But anyway, we went over, and it was mud road back then. You know, it wasn't hard top, nothing. It was mud at that time. And so we went and went to visit, and old Ethel was so pleased that I came. She was just absolutely beside herself. She said, I just worried myself with Jean, she said, and I just don't seem to be able She doesn't like coffee too well, but she said she will drink it. But she said, I just don't seem to. I said, well, I'll tell you what she needs is a nice cup of tea and a nice soft-boiled egg, I said, and some fingers. Because we used to make toast fingers and dip it in the egg. You know, you have an egg cup.
Yes.
And you dip it in the egg, and so that's what I fixed for Jean. And of course, she'd just had a new baby. He was just a little fella.
2 weeks
and,
old.
Yeah.
We've been friends ever since. We got to visit back and forth in homes. Our husband told the same stories years after years after years, but it never changed, and we always laughed, didn't we? We always laughed.
Same jokes?
Yeah, same jokes. But then nevertheless, she's been to my home in England. I went to her home in Birmingham. And so I feel like we're sisters. We're sisters in life, and that's the way I love her to death. She's my dearest, dearest friend that I have here.
And you know,
Very special. Very special.
when we have a conversation on the telephone, both of us tell the other, I love you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's important.
That's a wonderful friendship. Let's talk about too, though, and the culture. We started talking about that. A few little things like, what was some of the hardest things for you to leave behind in England? I mean, I can't even imagine. You know, my family pretty much lives within 5 miles of our birthplace. You know, so it's hard to know how you leave. Of course, you were very young too at that time.
I think I'd done very well for a while. And I was expecting a baby, and I was very sick, carrying Pat. And I was also getting homesick.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't when I first got there. I mean, it was all new and exciting, but when I'd get a letter from home, that would, make me homesick, and then I would go into the woods and cry because I didn't want anybody to see me, and I didn't want to hurt the family's feelings because they'd think maybe we're not doing enough for her, you see. And after my baby was born, it ended. The homesickness ended.
That grounded you too, probably
It
for
me.
the
It did.
yes.
Actually, I didn't miss anything except some of the food,
Right.
the fish and chips, Cadbury's chocolate, the English tea, just stuff like that.
Right.
You know,
How about you, Roma? Is there anything that you just every once in a while just think, oh man, I'd love this?
Yeah, I love crumpets. Yes, crumpets are like a dough that's made. You can make them yourself, but we used to be able to buy them from the baker, you know. And
Do you make them?
I have made them, yes, and they're quite simple to make.
Yeah.
And then you toast them, and they have great big holes in them. When you put the butter and the marmalade or whatever you use on it, it just sinks in there, and it's just delicious.
You're making me hungry for crumpets.
I think those were one of the few things I miss because we had been rationed for so long in England that things were, well, we had 7 children, well 6 when I lived there. I didn't have the 7th till after I left. But the six of us, we all had a ration book. We all had an identity number. By DXAL 246 line 1 was my dad. DXAL 246 line 2 was my mom. I was number 3, 4, 5, and all the way. So that was our ration books. And you had 2 ounces of butter a week. You had 4 ounces of margarine a week. And you had 2 ounces of bacon a week, 8 ounces of meat a week. So we used to put all of our meat ration together and have one big roast on Sunday. And my mother could squeeze that roast. She'd say to me, if you go to the butcher, tell him not to send any bone. I don't want any bone because it weighs too much. Mm-hmm. So I didn't dare ever come back with anything except what she wanted. But nevertheless, she could use that to make a roast first day, a cold slice of meat with mashed potatoes and gravy the next day. And if there was something left, she would grind it up and put potatoes and cheese, and little cheese and onion, because cheese was also rationed. I think, if I remember right, we used to get 4 ounces of cheese. And children had 1 pint of milk a day. Adults had 3 pints per week.
Wow.
And so that's part of the rationing anyway.
And that's certainly why we were the land of plenty, why the United States, and of course they were rationed as well during the Depression, and I understand that too. But
you know, we really did appreciate the American soldiers. As children, on Saturday night, they would come down to what we call the circle, and that's where the little pubs were, the eating places, and the shops. And us kids would gather down there, and then all of a sudden they'd holler and they would throw up handfuls of pennies into the air. And we would just scramble for those pennies, and they would give you gum and candy bars once in a while, and we just thought that was marvelous, you know.
how often have you been able to go back to England as far as in your lifetime? Probably many times.
The first time, it was 13 years since I'd seen my mother and father. The second time, it was 25 years, so it was another 12 years. And then after that, Jean and I went back several years together. And we'd go to London, and she'd go to Birmingham, and I'd go to Oxford. And then we'd meet again when it was time to come back.
How about you, Jean? Did you go often as you could, I'm sure?
Actually, in my later years, when the children were grown and gone, I went every other year.
Right.
Pretty well. Or I would go to my brothers in Hawaii,
Right.
too. I like
Yes.
to go there. My youngest brother settled in Hawaii,
Yeah.
and so I like to go there, too.
How about, I need some examples of some words, something that not you, but the British say that we maybe, I've known Jean and Roma for quite a long time. Jean and I were neighbors, so we would always do little quizzes with Jean as far as, okay, what do you call this in England, you know? So give us some examples, Jean.
On a car, the bonnet is the hood. We call that the bonnet. And the trunk is the boot.
Okay.
And so then let's see, what was I going to say?
Alphamo.
the lift.
Alphamo.
Alphamo.
Wait a minute.
Yes, Alphamo.
Alphamo.
Alphamo means wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, yes,
Alphamo.
Alphamo.
Okay.
And of course the lift is the elevator, right? Can you?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that would be, yes.
Or sometimes when they used to shake a leg out waiting for a car to come by, that was a lift. Got a lift?
Yes,
You know,
yes.
mostly they
We
were.
wouldn't do that now.
No, they don't do that now. And we didn't, you know, but then you were talking about old things from old times.
Right. I was telling them before we went on air that I happened to be in England one time, and even though we speak English, that there were some people that we couldn't even understand, even though it was English. And I've noticed, and Jean was mentioning this too, that, or in Roma, we were both talking, that they're British. And of course, I'm sure it's been watered down. I'm sure when you guys go home that your families, or if you see families, they're like, where'd your accent go? But you have different accents. And as Roma said, you know, it's just like the United States. You know, we have different accents if you're from Minnesota, if you're from Alabama or Texas or anything. So, yeah, and so that's kind of noticeable, not as much. Well, you know what? I've been sitting here with this in front of me, and so can we have some tea time?
Sure.
Would that be something we could do?
It's about that time.
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Roma and I have never had a real cup of tea in America unless we made it ourselves. We could not believe when we would go to a restaurant that they would bring us a cup of water, not boiling, not really hot, with a bag sticking in it. And it was almost an insult.
It's also an Englishman, of course.
So
We're
anyway,
Americans yet.
we do use English tea. And when you make the tea, I'll tell you a little bit about it. You put boiling water in the pot first, the teapot. Then you let it just set for about 5 minutes.
It warms the pot.
Warms the
Excuse me,
pot.
yeah,
That's all right. That's okay.
It warms the pot and prepares the material that it's made of, the porcelain that it's made of.
So it's warm.
Yes.
To get hot.
That's right. So then you tip that out, and then you put your bags in, and or your loose tea, which we was used to back then, and fill it up with the boiling water. Then you put your tea cozy on top of your teapot for another 5 minutes, and then you would stir
You steep it, but if
after steeping it. Yeah, I was looking for that word, Roma.
good, thank you.
Yes, I was. Thank you. And so after it's steeped and it's sat, then you poured.
I see.
And usually the English put the milk and sugar in the cups before you pour the tea. This is a gift from my sister. I cannot believe she'd done this, but in an old suitcase, she bought me a complete set of plates, lunch plates, cups, saucers, bowls, everything that you would imagine to go with a china set. And it's Royal Albert.
Yeah, I
And
see
you
that.
can find this at, what's that store in the mall? Dillard's in Columbia.
Jean, while you have the microphone, tell us what these little tidbits are
Yes,
that I've been sitting here smelling, getting a
I
wonderful
could not
aroma.
believe that Roma, or none of my girls had English biscuits, which you call cookies. I'm very sorry about that because usually one of us keeps them all the time. These are sausage rolls, and that you make a pastry like you can make a pie, and then you fill it with a good quality sausage, no cheap sausage. And of course you bake them in a very hot oven, and they're a delicacy. And wherever I take them, I don't bring one back. And if we're supposed to take something to a party, they always ask me to bring sausage rolls.
Sausage rolls.
Right.
Okay. And what?
Roma made a little banana bread.
Mm.
I intended to have some English custard to go on that, like we used to have what they call it, a banana pudding. They used to call it banana pudding, and you pour this hot custard on the top, and I make my own custard. It's got I've got what they call bird's custard powder, and incidentally, it came from Birmingham.
Yay.
Birds had their factory in Birmingham, but that's where the powder we always used to make our own custard, and then you pour it hot over the top of the. That's not got anything on it at all. It's just plain. Excuse me, Mike.
Right. Well, it would. It smells wonderful, and I'm sure it's going to taste great. That custard sounds really wonderful
I
too.
was planning to put that on the top, but I had a different.
Next time, Roma.
Yeah, okay,
Next
that's
time.
fine, that's
Okay. Now we are going to have some tea, and we're going to have some sausage rolls and some banana bread. So, first of all, I have to have a drink here. We don't do salute, do we?
No, that's an Italian.
I'm sorry.
What do they do, Roma?
I'm surrounded by two.
Cheers?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
cheers. We
cheers.
could do cheers. Cheers. We're going to have Martina join us here in a little bit.
You go.
Jean,
Hmm?
how did I go all these years and not have one of these? I love it.
I thought you would have done as much as we.
Very good. I don't know if we're going to eat this whole thing on camera, but okay. And then we have to have some of Roma's banana banana bread.
It's just plain. It's got nothing. It's just bananas and eggs and flour.
It's what? Banana?
Bananas.
These are lovely.
Eggs, sugar, and flour.
A little butter in there.
Yes, and butter. Yes.
I figured that. Jean, before we go, I want to talk to you about your book. You have written a book, and I would like to know a little bit about that.
Okay, this little fella here is my great-grandson. It's Jackson Calvin Ray. His parents are Patrick and Brittany Ray. And they live in Kansas City. And one day, my son came to see us, to see me, and he said, "Mom, I want you to come to dinner Sunday." I said, "Okay." And so this is kind of emotional, so I hope I can do this okay. We eat dinner, and he said, "Mom," he said, "sit down." He said, "I have something to tell you." I said, "No." I said, "It's bad." And so he started crying, and I did too, and we cried for a long, long time, not knowing what was wrong. I mean, I didn't anyway. And I was so upset all that day, and so I better go to church tonight, which I usually do on a Sunday night. And one of my friends, he was Wanda Wyatt, and she was sitting across from me, and she said, "Jean, how did your day go?" And the floodgates opened. So I couldn't talk, I couldn't tell them because I was just too choked up. So I went home and started writing a book about my life story. Why I did that, I really don't know. Maybe it had been in the back of my mind for some time. I don't know. I just did. And I typed till 3 o'clock in the morning. Hence, a year later, I finished the manuscript, and they published it in 2 papers, the Chronicle Herald and the what's it?
Home Press.
The Home Press. They'd done a lovely job with pictures, and I was real pleased. And so after so many people had read these articles in the paper, they said, "Jean, you must write a book." We loved that. And there was kind of a big demand for me to do that, so I redid the book, started over from chapter 1, and added another 6 chapters, and did a better job with the pronunciation and all that, and had it proofread. And then a friend of Sonia's, who had books published, said that they could get that published for me, and then they set the wheels in motion, and I have the book. It's not a big book, but it's quite interesting. It is my childhood during World War II.
Wow.
And from there to when I become a mirror image of the American women. So now you know the reason why I wrote this was because my little grandson, but I didn't tell you the details. I got carried away a little bit, didn't I? Anyway, my grandson has MPS 3. It is a generic, it's, let's see, what are those?
It's genetic.
It is a genetic disease, yes, and there is no cure. And very little research is done because not too many children have this. And usually they're diagnosed about 2 years old. But Jackson was 4. I believe he was 4 when they diagnosed him. And the lifespan is, according to the researchers, up to early teenage years. But you know, they don't know everything.
That's right.
He's in God's hands, and that's what I had to do in the end. I said, "God, you have to take this burden from me because I just can't carry this load. It's too much." And he did. And so I'm real thankful. I enjoy that boy. We all do. We don't think of the future.
No.
We enjoy the present.
Yeah. One day at a time. One day at a time.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, that's a nice song to remember. One
Yes.
day at a time, sweet Jesus. Yeah.
Okay. Ladies, this has been wonderful. Just getting reacquainted, learning things that even though you know someone for your almost entire life. That you get reacquainted and learn things that are new. And so I say cheers to you. Cheers. Cheers to you, Roma. Cheers to everyone out there. And we will see you the next time we have a senior moment.